We continue our service now with Seder Kriyat HaTorah, the service for the reading of the Torah. And this is a special week because this Shabbat we begin the ending. And by that I mean we are starting the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, which is the fifth and final book of the Torah. So we know that what is coming ultimately is the death of Moses, and we end this Torah cycle, this entire year's Torah cycle, on Simchat Torah, which is just a little bit more than 2 months away. And we know how the story ends, but we read it anyway. I like to refer to the names of the 5 books in their Hebrew names as opposed to their English names. That's why I said Devarim instead of Deuteronomy. And in fact, Deuteronomy is not even a Hebrew word. It's a Greek word. Deutero meaning second and onomy meaning telling. So this is the second telling of the story of the children's, meaning the children of Israel, their passage through the promised land. Through the desert to the promised land. And Moses, and the word Devarim means words, things or words. And Moses is going to be delivering several very lengthy sermons to the Israelites in which he will go back and do a 40 years in review, where he will repeat all of the things that have happened, the events, the critical events in the lives of the Israelites, namely the battles they have fought to get to where they are, the kings they have vanquished in the foreign lands of the foreign tribes, the bad ways in which they've behaved, mainly through the sin of the golden calf and their constant complaining and so on and so forth, until it got so bad that Moses finally had to say enough and pled his case to God, and God said, the only people going into the land are going to be those that did not come out of slavery in Egypt. Otherwise, they're going to be bringing that slave mentality with them into the new land, and it is not going to go well. So I'm going to chant a little bit from Parashat Devarim, and then on the other side, I'm going to talk a little bit more about specifically what is in this Torah portion. So I hope you'll join me in the blessing. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach, Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Vata'anu oti vatomru tov hadavar asher dibarta la'asot, va'ekach et roshei shiftechem anashim chachamim viduim va'etain otam roshim aleichem sarei alafim v'sarei me'ot v'sarei chamishim v'sarei asarot v'shotrim l'shivtechem. Va'atzaveh et shoftechem be'et hahi lemor, shama ben achechem ushvatem tzedek ben ish uven achiv uven gero lo takiru fanim bamishpat kakaton kagadol tishma'un lo taguru mipnei ish ki hamishpat lelohim hu v'hadavar asher yikshe mikem takrivun elai ushmativ. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So this particular Torah portion, Devarim, the first Torah portion of the book of Deuteronomy, takes place on the first day of Shabbat, which is, according to Jewish tradition, 37 days before Moses is going to die. And he is beginning his second telling, his repetition of the Torah to the assembled children of Israel. And he's reviewing, as I mentioned, all these events that have occurred and the laws that were given in the course of the 40-year journey during the desert from Egypt to Sinai, eventually to the Promised Land. And he is once again rebuking the people for their failings and their iniquities. And he's telling them, he's really begging them and pleading them and enjoining upon them to keep the Torah and to observe its commandments in the land that God is giving them as their eternal heritage, and into which they will cross after his death. But of course, he has been told that he will not cross. So the first thing that Moses does is he recalls how important it is for the people to assign judges and magistrates to ease the burden of meting out justice to the people and teaching them Torah. And this was a lesson that Moses himself learned very early on in the journey. In fact, it was right after the Israelites had come out of Egypt, and Moses and the children end up in Midian, which is the homeland of his wife and his father-in-law, Yithro. And his father-in-law sees that Moses is sitting day and night, listening to the complaints of the people and trying to pass judgment, and says to Moses, "You better get somebody to help you." And so it's interesting that it seems to have gone full circle here, because now Moses, for the second or third time, at least the second time, is delivering these same instructions to the people, saying, you need to find judges and magistrates. And this is where the word sareh comes from, which actually means it can also be a prince. So princes of the people, or magistrates of the people, who are going to listen to mostly the smaller claims. So there are going to be some judges who are taking care of 10 people, and some 100 people, and some 1,000 people. And Moses has said, if the case is too difficult for you to handle, bring it to me. And so that is kind of the judicial system, so to speak, that Moses is setting up, because he realizes that this task is way too difficult for one person to handle. And these judges can't just be any old person. They have to be leaders within their tribes. They have to be honest. They have to not take bribes. And most importantly, they have to judge all people equally. They are not to give preferential treatment to the rich because they happen to be rich, and they're not to give deferential treatment to the poor just because they take pity on them because they're poor. So they're to judge all the people equally, which I think has some real real lessons for us today in our own society as we look at how rich and poor are perhaps treated differently under our own judicial system. Moses is also going to recount some more recent events. He's going to talk about how certain nations, the Moabites and the Ammonites, refused to allow the Israelites to pass through their countries. And so that has fueled this continual war between the Moabites and the Ammonites, whose descendants are still to this day enemies of Israel, and refuse to allow the Israelites to spend a night or two in their land as they were passing through. And Moses also has divvied up the land among the 12 tribes. So there are, now the Kohans and Levites are not going to get land. They are eventually going to become, their job is going to be the temple in Jerusalem and taking care of the temple. So they're not going to get ancestral land. So what happens to those two groups? Well, Moses gives a half a portion each to the tribe of Manasseh. Now, you may remember that Jacob had 12 sons, and he also had two grandsons who were half Egyptian and half Israelite. They were the sons of Joseph. And on the day that Jacob dies and he gives his final blessing to his sons, he gives those two grandsons a half a portion each of the land. So that is the tribe of Manasseh. They're each going to get a half portion. Also interesting is what happens to two of the tribes, Reuben and Gad. Now, over these years, the tribes of Reuven and Gad, G-A-D, not G-O-D, become shepherds, but very prolific shepherds, and they have lots of livestock and so on. And they've settled in a part of the land before they cross the River Jordan that that has great grazing property for their cattle. And so right before they're getting ready to cross the River Jordan and go into the land of Israel, the leaders of these two tribes, of Reuven and Gad, come to Moses and say, you know, we'd kind of like to stay on this side of the Jordan River instead of going into the new land with you, because our cattle are doing very well here. Well, Moses doesn't like that idea because he knows that what's impending once they get into the new land is going to be many, many battles with foreign kings and foreign tribes. And he doesn't think it is appropriate for these two Israelite tribes to just kind of bow out and beg off having to be part of the impending warfare. So Moses says to them, you're not getting out of it that quick. You will come into the new land and you will fight our battles with us. And then once that's done, little did we know it was going to be another 3,000 years that we were fighting our enemies, that once that is done, you may return to the west of the Jordan River and you may control those lands and have them for your cattle. So everybody's got to participate in the impending conflagrations that we know are coming. And then finally, Moses gives the message about his successor, Joshua, who's going to take the people into the land and lead them in their battles. And once again, has to assuage the fear of the Israelites by telling them, don't be afraid. The Lord your God is going to be with you, and God will fight for you. So, I guess my question is the following. Why do we need an entire book of the Torah dedicated just to Moses's messages all of which are nothing but repetition of what's come before. And I think there are probably many answers to these questions, but for me, the most obvious one is that, there's the expression, tell them once, tell them again, and tell them a third time. Because the Israelites have been very um, uh, stubborn, to put it a nice way. They have not wanted to follow God's commandments. They've gotten themselves in trouble a number of times. A whole generation had to die out before the new generation would be allowed into the land. Moses is not going to be with them. And so he is laying down the law, so to speak, and really letting them know how they need to behave and what they need to do in order to make sure that this venture into this new land, which God had promised their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so many years before, is going to come to fruition with as few problems as possible. Now, we know the rest of the story because we see what happens in Joshua and in Samuel and in the books of Kings. There's lots of historical evidence of these continued wars. And so, we have the good fortune of being able to read ahead in the text and know what's going to happen. This has always reminded me, these chapters in Deuteronomy, of Moses is like the parent sending their kid off to college. And I'm embarrassed to say, I remember the drive to the University of Illinois with my son, driving him down to school for his freshman year. And it was probably one of the most angst-filled, contentious car rides I've ever had. Because I felt like I just couldn't get the information out to my kid forcefully enough and in enough quantity for him to really understand. And so, of course, everything was fine. He and I have a wonderful relationship. None of us needed therapy after that. So I think it's just typical for parents to really want to impress upon their children how important some of these things are that they need to be doing in order to stay safe, in order to stay healthy, and in order to have a positive experience. And so Moses is taking that car ride down to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, but he's doing it with his Israelites and telling them what they need to do going into the future. So at this time, I'd like to offer Misha Berach for those who are in need of healing, those within our own community who are suffering from illness, whether that be physical, emotional, or spiritual. And at this time, I have a couple names that I want to mention because they were given to me prior to my preparing this service today. And that is Eve Rosenberg and Alexander Ritter. And I'm sure that you have other names that you would like to mention in your own hearts. And so let's do that now for a moment, and then we'll sing together. Mi sheberach avotenu mekor habracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. If you have a prayer book with you in your room, we turn to page 77 for Aleinu L'Shabeach, and I won't ask you to rise, but let's sing together. Aleinu L'Shabeach Ladon HaKol, Latet Gedula Liotzer Breshit, Shelo Asanu Kigoye Haratzot, Velo Samanu Kimishpachot Adama, Shelo Sam Chelkinu Kahem, Vegor Aleinu Kechol Hamonam, Va'anachnu Korim, Umishtahavim Umodim, Livnei Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu yihei Adonai echad. Ushemo echad. The time has come for us to remember those who are no longer with us, those who have left this plane of existence to move on to the world to come, those whom we have loved and lost in our own lives, and those in our Seacrest community. We are particularly conscious this Shabbat of Cantor Sheldon Morell, who was a wonderful addition to our community, somebody whom we loved and respected and whom we admired. Sheldon was a tzaddik, a mensch, and on a personal note, I just have to say that he was wonderful to me from the time I came to Seacrest. And he and I had a mutual admiration society. And he gave me some books, and I will treasure those always. And I also wanted to add that I was able to speak with him and sing to him on the afternoon before he passed. And I shared prayers with him and music with him, wished him an early Shabbat Shalom. And I know that even though he was unable to respond, that Shelley heard me, especially when I told him that we all loved him, that we were all praying for his well-being. So, Chazan Sheldon Morell, Zichrono Livracha, we will miss you, and we know that your memory will be a blessing to us and to the thousands and thousands whose lives you touched throughout your lifetime. Together we join in Kaddish Yatom. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'amad divrah chirutei ve'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv yimru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudasha b'richu, la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran v'alma v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, Hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'yimru. Amen. May God, who creates peace in the high and holy places, bring peace to all of us who mourn, and comfort to the bereaved, and let us say, Amen. So this Shabbat, like last Shabbat, are two services that I was not expecting to bring to you on live stream on SVTV, but sadly, that's the way it goes. Um, God willing, by next Saturday, everything will be back to normal again. I fully plan on having services in the synagogue, so that is the 24th. Yes, the 24th. Had to get my dates straight here. And so Friday night blessings in the buildings, in all the buildings, and Saturday morning Shabbat services. We will keep you posted if there are any changes or if we're only going to have certain groups in the synagogue and others not. You will get plenty of notice, and your life enrichment specialists will keep you informed. Other than that, this tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, there will be a special service for Tisha B'Av. I think this year of all years, we need comfort, and we are looking not only at all of those sad and catastrophic things that have happened to our people throughout our history, but also in more recent days. And so I will be using a service from Mishkan Tefillah for festivals. You will not have a copy of this, but I will be doing all the readings, and I'll guide you along as best as possible. And I hope that you will join me. 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, July 18th, and that will also be on SVTV. I will be gone beginning Wednesday of this week. For a week, I'm going to be returning to Chicago to see family, and also going to Madison, Wisconsin to see family. And I have not visited my parents' graves in 2 years. It is my mother's 3rd yahrzeit and coming on my father's 10th yahrzeit. So I think it's important to go. And I will miss you, but I will be back. So let's sing, and then we will do Kiddush and Motzi, as we always do. Ma yafe hayom, Shabbat shalom. Ma yafe hayom, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Please join me in Motzi. In Kiddush, excuse me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen l'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Have a wonderful Shabbat, everybody. I hope to see you tomorrow morning for Tisha B'Av service. And lehitraot. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.